Welcome to this fifth episode of the Caribbean Cannabis Culture podcast. My name is Julie. I hope, that you enjoyed the last episode that we've done with the artist Tyranny. I hope that you've learned a lot about how the European and French market is working towards CBD products, hemp products, and how it's always good to support Black-owned business because you don't have a lot of them. So I really hope you enjoyed this episode and you were able to learn a little bit more about what Tyranny is doing here in Guadeloupe, in Martinique as well, and also in France. But today, we are going to TNT. We are going to Trinidad and Tobago. I'm super glad because our guest of today, she's born and raised in Trinidad. She's an educator, an advocate. I love watching her content on Instagram because I'm able to understand a little bit more about what's happening in Trinidad in regards of products, consumer experience, and much more. So yeah, please welcome Nayasha Sadlow. Hey Nayasha, how are you?
Hi, Julie. Thank you very much for having me. I am great today. I'm actually really excited to be on here and talk about, cannabis in the country, in my country, in the Caribbean, and even talk about cannabis in your country a little bit, So, yeah.
Great. So first of all, I would love for you to share with us, how was the last year in Trinidad and Tobago with everything happening? How did you live that through COVID and through all the restrictions?
Aside from cannabis, honestly, I can honestly say I'm grateful to not have been affected as badly as a lot of other people were affected. Mm-hmm. But, aside from that, I'm grateful that I have not fallen ill with the virus either, and that I'm good. But I things so far have been good. Yeah. But I mean, personally.
Okay, great.
For the nation in general, that is a whole other topic, honestly. Yeah. Just like anywhere else in the world, there are people who are suffering, there are people who are getting through this, but the most important thing is that, the ones who are getting through help to pull through the ones who are suffering, and we all get through this together. So,
great.
Yeah, but compared to a lot of other places, we are fairly okay. On the way to recovery.
Let us know, how did you realize that you wanted to be part of the cannabis space?
Right. Well, I firstly, I'm an advocate for cannabis and cannabis legalization. I'm also an educator. So how I got into cannabis in the first place, I have a very long medical history. I have an autoimmune illness. I have an overactive immune system. And ever since I was 6 years old, I was in and out of the hospital dealing with my immune system and my issue with my eyes. I'm pretty sure you can notice they're two different colors. So I've had a lot of medical issues growing up my entire life. And there was one day I was watching an article, a news piece on Vice. There's a channel called Vice, and it was called We the Cat. I learned about cannabis medicinally, and that was my introduction to using cannabis. I had used cannabis one other time in my entire life before, and it wasn't something, it was just a try, it was just something for me to try. It wasn't something that I was like, okay, I'm going to start using cannabis now. But it was some years later, after that one time, I learned about it medicinally. And at the time I was going through a lot of medical ailments. I was on 16 tablets a day to combat my immune system, to combat insomnia, to combat seizures that I was getting because of the concoction of medications that they had me on.
Wow.
And I remember learning about CBD and the way CBD helped with seizures. So at that time I was really desperate because now I'm getting seizures, and I just had a surgery, and my entire life just had to pause. I had to stop going to school. I had to stop all my sports. I had no social life. So me learning about this thing, being able to help my seizures, and I had friends who used to, sorry. I had friends who used to,
Yeah.
So I hit them up, and I was like, yo, I want to try this thing. And that really was the start of something completely new for me in my life. It helped me to regain my appetite. It helped me to basically get sleep at night. I didn't have to take Valiums anymore. And I was on Valium at 16 years old.
Wow.
You know, I had to be prescribed Valium at 16 years old. I weaned myself off of the medication. And this is just my personal anecdotal experience. I'm not telling anyone to, you know, just drop your medicines and start smoking cannabis. No, this is just my anecdotal experience. It really did help to change my life. And when I experienced that, I had to tell everybody. I had to tell everyone, like, yo, this thing that I never thought in my entire life I would end up using, that I never even thought of using, literally changed my life. And I just wanted to learn everything that I could learn about it and teach people as I learned, you know, talk to my parents about it, talk to my friends about it, everything. So that's how I basically got introduced into like advocacy and telling persons about cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
And then that just got way more extreme in 2018. As I just basically created my page, and a group of persons, including another activist, another well-known local activist, a group of us gathered in front of the parliament and delivered a petition to the prime minister. Well, he's still the prime minister now, Keith Rowley. And it was basically a petition signed by over 10,000 people for the decriminalization and, well, the further legalization of cannabis in the country. And that, honestly, it started a conversation, a nationwide conversation that little to no one was having. I'll be very honest. I'm not going to say that that was the cause for decriminalization, but it did start a conversation. Mm-hmm. And everything just kept, you know, snowballing into what it is today. And on the 23rd of December 2019, cannabis was decriminalized in Trinidad and Tobago. And, well, this year we got promises of legalization, so I guess we're just waiting to see.
Yeah, that's crazy, because so I didn't know this part of your story, and the fact that basically, as you said, it's like a snowball event, like snowball events where, because something that you were suffering from, you were able to learn from it, and now you just want to educate people about it. And the fact that you advocate for decriminalization is pretty cool. And I'm pretty sure that it was a piece to what happened in Trinidad in 2019. That's great.
Yeah, it was really great to be a part of that, though. It was really great to definitely be a part of that.
Yeah, that's cool. But because you discussed about this, that you were able to be a part of in Trinidad and Tobago. I would love to discuss about the culture of cannabis over there. So how the perception around the cannabis plant are evolving. So, for example, since you were a teenager, so you were a teenager in Trinidad and Tobago, you heard people discussing about the plant. And now 2019, where you are consuming cannabis and where it's decriminalized. How can you talk to us about that?
When I had just started using cannabis, my mother cried when she found out. So that's just
oh my God, yeah.
That is just a sneak peek into the way it was viewed. It honestly was viewed in a negative light. It was highly illegal. This baggie could have gotten me arrested.
Yeah.
You know, a little scraggly so could have gotten me arrested. But now that it has been decriminalized, and you know, I want to add to that, even though the general public opinion of cannabis was negative, there was a lot of negative stigma, especially negative stigma tied to the Rastafarian movement and people who follow, you know, Rastafari. There was just a lot of stigma where that was concerned. Despite that, I would say now, and even before, all the way back then, at least one person in every other household used cannabis in some form. It didn't just have to be putting it to your mouth and lighting it and smoking it. There are people who eat edibles. There are people who use CBD products. There are people who, so all of that, I consider people who use cannabis. It's not just about lighting it up and smoking it, you know? So despite the fact that a lot of people here use cannabis, there was still a very strong negative stigma where using it and having anything to do with it was concerned. But as the clock struck 12 on December 23rd, 2019, all of a sudden the public perception was just like, maybe this thing is not so bad.
It's always like that.
Maybe, just maybe it's not so bad. And everybody wants edibles and everybody want to try cannabis for healing. And I mean, it's not such a bad thing.
So basically now, what can you do? Because it's not legalized yet, but I bet that now you can have a quantity on yourself. What are the rules for the decriminalization?
Right. So since decriminalization, you are now allowed to be in possession of up to 30 grams of cannabis. So each adult is allowed to be in possession of up to 30 grams of cannabis in your home. You can have cannabis in public as well in your possession, but there are certain rules and restrictions when it comes to being near a school, near a sporting facility intended for children, etc., which honestly is understandable. When it comes to being able to cultivate cannabis, you can only grow up to 4 plants, and that is the main topic of controversy right now, because one plant can give you more than 30 grams. So if one person can grow up to 4 plants, you can have up to 5 grams of cannabis concentrate, whether it's resin or rosin, wax, whatever, that is your choice. And well, it's no longer against the law to smoke cannabis, but you still cannot sell, you cannot buy, you're not supposed to sell or buy seeds, flour, any sort of derivative, none of that. It's all still illegal by law.
You can grow some plants, but someone cannot sell any seed. It doesn't, and for us it's the contrary. They can sell seeds, but they are named collection seeds, but you can't grow them. It's kind of weird. Yeah.
So you can sell the seeds, but you can't purchase them.
You have stores here.
I mean, but you can't grow them.
I know. Basically, you have to, on the box, so on the packaging of the seeds, you need to have the nomination collection seeds, meaning that you're going to buy them in order to just collect them. Okay. But if after that they catch you, basically you are growing some plants, you will go to prison for that. It doesn't make any sense. I know.
So is the possession of cannabis itself legal?
No, so here we are restricted. So we are under French laws. So anything regarding cannabis with THC in it, it's prohibited.
Highly illegal.
Yeah. So yeah, it doesn't make sense. And for you guys, you can grow the plants, but you can't really buy some seeds from a shop or something.
Exactly. Yeah, like the seeds are just supposed to descend from the heavens. I don't know. They're supposed to just fall.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, from the sky.
Yeah, because so when we're discussing about the plants itself, you are saying something really interesting to me, that basically in Trinidad and Tobago, you don't have any land race cultivars. You don't have any strains that have been cultivated for many years. So what is basically the market in Trinidad and Tobago? Do you see a lot of hybrids coming from North America?
Yeah. So right now, honestly, the big goal is to get foreign genetics, because no one here, well, there are few people here who really grasp and understand how to properly breed cannabis plants to stabilize a strain. Yeah. So the demand for seeds does not meet the supply when it comes to locally bred stuff. And then there's just this huge distrust of anything that's local, anything that's locally grown, locally bred, anything like that. Thankfully, I can honestly say that I'm helping to break the stigma about locally grown cannabis. But where that is concerned, even the locally grown cannabis, it is foreign strains. It is strains that people, get in and they grow it. There's rarely anybody here who is really putting focus on developing what we have here locally. Yeah. People are more looking on the outside to bring in hybridized stuff, and even with that, I have found that a lot of growers are not focusing on making sure that they get stuff that would grow properly in our climate, like certain sativa dominant strains, certain even hybrid strains, but ones that perform good in tropical climates. Everybody just looking for indicas. and want to know why it's not coming out the same as the way it comes out when it's grown in California or grown in Canada or something. But it's like, I wonder why. Gee,
it's a little bit too humid probably over here, and the wind. Anyway, but what you said is really interesting, because basically, so last time you told me that you don't think that the government see the power in getting their, like, your own strain, your own cultivar, and now you're saying approximately the same, that people are not really trying to stabilize one type of cultivar. They just want to grow things that they see on Instagram, on TV, and they don't even realize that you come, especially outdoors, it's not going to be possible to grow something like an indica plant without any mold in it, without any issues, because it's not going to be the right climate. I find that really interesting, but I have a question. Do you know, is the cannabis plant in Trinidad and Tobago has been brought up during the colonization or something like that? Because you have a big Indian community. So I wonder if you have like this link between India.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The first records of cannabis being introduced into Trinidad and Tobago, as well as a few other Caribbean islands, is when the indentured laborers came, when the East Indians would have came from India via indentured labor ship, and they brought a lot of their herbs and spices, including cannabis, to this side of the world, to this part of the Caribbean. So unlike places like Jamaica and other parts of South America that are on this side of the world that have land-raised cultivars, we have no record of cannabis being here or being around, being spoken about, anything like that prior to the arrival of the East Indians. So yeah, it's definitely tied. It's definitely tied in.
Okay.
And that is also why that's why we don't have a land race as well.
Yeah, but do you think yourself, are you going to be working towards that? So in order to create genetics that will be perfect for Trinidad and Tobago, is it something that you are looking for, or maybe you would like to do?
Honestly, creating a land race is kind of impossible because by definition, I understand what you mean. But when it comes to stabilizing genetics, I don't feel as though I personally would be directly involved in something like that, because out of all things cannabis that I learned that I'm interested in, growing and breeding is not my favorite. So, so I'm definitely not going to get so heavily involved in something that I'm not as passionate about. But I definitely have some friends. I know some people within the community, the local community, who are doing just that. I know someone actually who has successfully bred their own genetics and have all the documentation to back it up. They have all the years of work, all the years of breeding and understanding and all of that to back it up. So yeah, there are people working towards it, and with every step of the way I would support them, but it's not me.
Okay, no, but that's great. That's great, because as you said, like, it's not for everybody, and it's not creating a land race, because per se you can't really create a land race. But as you said, it's really stabilizing some genetics that will be grown for many years and will be for the climate. Okay, so you are not from, so the growing aspect of it is not really your main interest. What is your main interest basically in the cannabis space?
If a lot of people might be shocked by this, but concentrates. I absolutely love concentrates. I mean, I know a lot about growing. I know a lot about cannabis in general, but my favorite is definitely concentrates. Solvent.
What is your favorite concentrate? What is the favorite one?
Like hash rosin, rosin made from bubble hash, or even like a screen, like sifted hash. Rosin is definitely my favorite. No other concentrate beats the taste of rosin, in my opinion, because rosin tastes closest to the actual flower.
Okay, is it solventless, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's super interesting, because basically this is a really emerging market, the concentrate market. Like Europe, they're not ready for that. In the Caribbean, even less ready for that. Like something that we see really in North America is really like exploding. But that's really interesting that so your main thing is going to be concentrate, rosin. So basically, I would love to ask you, what type of consumer are you? So I guess that now you are mainly consuming concentrate.
No, actually, flour will always be the cream of the crop. Yes, flour will always be the cream of the crop. But I always do have my concentrates on hand, definitely, in the form of wax, in the form of a vape, in the form of whatever. I definitely always try to keep some concentrates on hand.
And so do you do them yourself, or you can buy it? You have some growers or some people who are selling concentrates?
Well, because of the fact that the sale of any of those things is illegal here, we have to try to figure it out. I usually get either bud or trim, or some, it has to be really good quality though, but I get some good quality bud or trim, and I have friends who own rosin presses, so I just send it on by them. There are different types of rosin as well. So if I'm not able to do like a wash of some hash, I would just send the flour or the trim over to get pressed directly into rosin.
Nice. Okay, great. So basically, with all your knowledge and because of what happened to you in the past, and now you are putting it into education. So I guess you first learn yourself about cannabis and everything, and now you are transmitting all those information. Is it still a challenge? Because we discussed about it, like we are seeing now that education passed by visuals. You need to discuss. You have now platforms, social media that can help to do that.
Yeah.
How are you living the fact that now it's a little bit, it's still, I'm going to say still difficult to communicate on cannabis on some platform, basically?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question, because right now Instagram is going through something where they are just targeting cannabis brands internationally. Yeah. So it's a little bit difficult. It was great for a while because social media is a really great resource when it comes to sharing information. It really is. But right now it's difficult because it's like you don't know which one of your posts are going to get you flagged. You don't know which one of your posts are going to get taken down, and you're going to get a warning on your account, and you like it's really a gamble right now. Mm-hmm. So it's difficult where that is concerned. But if it wasn't for that, it pretty much would have been good. It would have been all right, smooth sailing.
Yeah, I don't really understand it myself. The reason why I'm posting less and less, because as you said, you never, even me, sometimes I'm posting something and I just see it disappear. I don't even know why. I don't understand what's happening. And yeah, what you said about like big brands is not even about you see someone smoking or you see someone like you see the cannabis plants. Sometimes it's just big corporations. They are legal in the states, in their country.
And they are getting taken down. People like this journalist Jimmy Devine, his stuff gets taken down a lot. Like it doesn't even have anything to do with it doesn't have to have anything to do with the consumption. It just, as you said, it doesn't have to be someone lighting up a spliff or someone posting a blog. Like you could just be posting your work, your information, your article, your work, and they are taking it down because their AI system or their automated system just flagged because they scanned that there was a cannabis leaf in it. They automatically say, well, okay, this is bad.
Yeah. I don't even, it's really because Instagram is Facebook, and the fact that Facebook is different in many countries. It's not like you have yes, you have one company, but like in the States, I realized that you can post something, especially about music. So normally you could do the same for cannabis. You see the laws are changing. So if the laws are changing, you're supposed to adjust your guidelines and everything. Don't just like cancel the page of everybody because you see something. Yeah. That's just dumb. Yes, so I would love also to finally discuss about and it's something that I'm asking everybody, and the fact that you
Yeah,
are a Caribbean woman, I would love to know your
yeah.
point of view of that. So what do you think about the future of the Caribbean cannabis industry or the cannabis market here in the Caribbean? How do you see it in like
Honestly,
5 years?
there's a lot of potential, and this one thing that I always say when I refer to cannabis is the cannabis tourism in the Caribbean. Like whenever I refer to cannabis in the Caribbean, I will always say this: cannabis tourism is a big thing, because imagine people being able to now come and be able to comfortably and freely relax and smoke a spliff or get access to the different cannabis products and the cannabis derivatives legally and not have to worry. Imagine if there's some sort of cannabis cafe or some sort of consumption lounge, as they refer to it. Imagine there being consumption lounges set up for people to just be able to go and freely and safely enjoy cannabis just as freely and safely as people would want to go enjoy a beer at a bar. I honestly believe that in itself has a lot of potential. And in the Caribbean, our countries have this weird way of just depending on one thing for income, and I don't know how we have not learned that really is not the best idea. And us in Trinidad and Tobago, this is an oil country, so we know how that goes.
Yeah.
We have a neighbor right next door that is currently deep in crisis, so we can see how that may go. And it's like, I feel like this is a really great opportunity for us to set up some sort of back end, some sort of other foundation to be able to hold the place just in case oil falls. But I don't know, people, it's not a common thought amongst people to think about something that could be subsidized, that could assist the economy in case of oil falling. But I just see cannabis having potential to be able to do all of that.
Yeah, I think, it's too bad, because to come back to on the decriminalization and stuff, you can see the government, and it's too bad most of the time when they take this type of decision, because they saw another country or something is happening, so they don't want to feel left out and, oh, let's do something, but they don't really have people like you who are extremely knowledgeable that can bring them inputs on really what can be done in 3, 5, 10 years and be able to guide them, because I'm pretty sure these people, they don't really know what they are.
Exactly.
They don't understand, they kind of understand, but they don't really see like further. They don't.
Yeah, they can't relate to the average person on the ground who uses cannabis. They really can't. They are very far detached from the cannabis industry, from the cannabis community, and they are the ones who are being put in place to set the rules for how this thing is gonna go. So I don't know.
Yeah, and one last thing, last time you said something really, really interesting, and it doesn't surprise me when we're talking about the decriminalization. The fact that we see the police, for example, so the law has been passed, but they don't really follow the new law. So they still are on people's back, like, oh, you have 3 grams on you, like go to jail and stuff. What can you say about that?
Right. So honestly, the police's attitude towards cannabis and dealing with persons who they see consuming cannabis or using cannabis has not changed. Obviously, some officers in some places would give you that bly, as we say it, but honestly, it has not changed. We are still seeing countless examples of people being, not just arrested for being over. I mean, I can understand you're saying you're over the limit, but that is a whole other topic by itself, because when you really do look at the limit, at any point when I cut my one plant, the police could come in my house and tell me that I'm breaking the law because my one plant is over 30 grams. So it's like the citizens are put in this deadlock of, if you want to use or consume cannabis, at some point you must end up breaking the law. And the police definitely have not eased up in the way they deal with people. If they see you rolling a spliff at the side of the road, I mean, yeah, I'm not allowed to smoke it in public, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to. You know, I could just be rolling it for when I get home. That doesn't mean that you have to come and pat me down, search my entire car, pull me down, search my license and my insurance. Like, the smell of cannabis and the sight of cannabis is still probable cause. Probable cause to be searched, probable cause to be questioned, and just bombarded with all of these negative accusations and treatments as though you're a criminal. You know, so that as well has not changed. And I've been saying time and time again, I don't know how the politicians and the people who are in charge expect the police, the attitude of the police, to change overnight when they legalize cannabis. I really don't know, because there really has not been any easing up on how they deal with people with cannabis. And a lot of them are still taking advantage of people, because a while ago, a user of my page had messaged me some videos. There was actual video evidence, and he sent it to me, and I posted it. Video evidence of a police officer confiscating his 15 grams of cannabis in a jar. The limit is 30 grams. This officer confiscated his 15 grams, put the entire jar on top. And that's a trick that they have been doing to people. They take in the cannabis. Let's say the cannabis is in this container, or let's say it's in a glass container. They're taking it and they put in everything on top of the scale. Okay. So they're weighing the cannabis and the container. So obviously it's going to come up to 100 and something grams or 60 something grams. And then they're telling you, well, it's either you go to jail or we deal with it. There's this nasty loophole of them saying if they take the cannabis out of the container to weigh it, they're going to be tampering with potential evidence. That is the nasty loophole that they have been using to take advantage of people who are still obeying the law.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really crazy. It's really crazy. So we are supposed to believe that they are just going to change their minds when the clock strikes midnight, when they legalize cannabis. Like, we're going to be safe, you know?
That's the issue, when people just want to make a change in the law, but don't really like change they don't really change, as you said, the mentality. Look, all these, the governmental institutions, they need to follow up and they need to be educated as well. So everything aligned. Like, as you said, you don't have the police with the same mindset than like 20, 30 years ago. And basically you have a change, or normally, you're not supposed to harass people for this type of stuff anymore.
Exactly.
It doesn't make sense. Last question, do you think there is like programs or people in Trinidad and Tobago trying to work with the government in order to make things change?
Honestly, it's difficult. It's difficult because I have tried to reach out to several people in a very professional manner. It's either you get, Trinidad is a place, I'm just going to be very honest, it's about who knows you. It's about who you know and who knows you, and how much racket could get in between whatever. So honestly, people like myself, people like Stay Calm, people like Nazma, people have been reaching out, advocates have been reaching out to people, and it's like, it's either we're ignored or we're met with, or we just get passed on to the secretaries, you know? We get passed on to the secretary, not coming down on secretaries or trying to demean them or anything, but you know what I mean? Like, they pass you on to the secretary, and the secretary is now a barrier between you and that person.
Yeah.
You know? So it's difficult. It's difficult. It's really difficult. They go to who they want. There's this one guy who they go to, who has been consulting them, and that one guy is so far removed from the local cannabis community as well. It's ridiculous. So it's like, at this point, I mean, in the explanatory bill for the cannabis control bill that they released the other day, they said that they were going to have aggressive education and information campaigns. And people like me are just here wondering, who are they going to go to educate persons on cannabis? are they gonna bring in like foreigners or something and train government employees that have nothing to do with cannabis, that have never studied or never connected with the average public on cannabis, to try to come and talk to persons? Like, people are not gonna listen to someone who they don't know. Like, someone who they know are very far disconnected from them trying to talk. It's like having a rich person dapper down in Gucci and in brand names trying to talk to poor kids about poverty. Like, you are very disconnected from my cause, right? Like, yeah. So it's like, who are they gonna go to? You know, they I don't know, are they going to go to the persons who the media has been speaking to for the last few years about this thing? Are they going to go to the persons who have been connected to the public, or are they going to just do their own thing as they have been doing their own thing the entire time? You know?
What you said is really interesting, because I think it's the same here. If you don't have a diploma, if you are not known about the space, the governmental space, or you don't know someone in this institution and stuff, you can come with a program, you can come with a training, like something done properly. People won't listen to you, because for them, you don't have you are nobody, kind of, and that's whack. That's really whack. Because as you said, I know you are really knowledgeable. You have some people, they understand, not only they understand the laws and everything that they try to apply, but they also understand the culture of cannabis and all the consumers and everybody that was advocating and has been targeted and stuff. And that's really too bad that government, they don't see that. They don't put that in their mind, that they have to deal with that also in order to do something like to put in place a proper law that will be for everybody, basically.
Exactly.
So, well, Nayasha, thanks a lot. I would love for you to give your social media handles, everything, so in order for people to find you and know what you're doing.
Of course. Well, I mainly operate on Instagram. The page is Budwise TT, at BUDWYISETT. Because recently Instagram has been restricting me and they shadow banned Budwise, I created a kind of a semi-personal profile as well, where people could still be in the loop about the day-to-day cannabis stuff that's going on. That is Take a Puff with Naipai. Is it Taking a Puff? I think it's Take a Puff.
I will put the handles in the description.
See, I'm so accustomed to just doing my stuff on Budwise. Instagram is really putting me under some pressure these days.
Yeah, no.
So many times I accidentally almost posted on the page, and I'm like, no, I'm not supposed to, because what if they just delete everything?
Yeah.
You know?
Man, no, but don't worry. I will put everything in the description, all your handles in the description. So if people want to reach out or even follow what you're doing in Trinidad, they will be able to.
Amazing. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Right.
Julie, thank you so much for having me. You are fantastic. I love what you do. I appreciate what you do so much. And like, just taking your work across borders, just embracing all the CARICOM. Wait, Guadeloupe is in CARICOM?
They don't want us.
No. No. because y'all are the French. Because
I know.
I would have said something, but I can't. I can't. I can't.
I know, don't worry. We used to it. We used to it.
We're still in the region.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you very much for inviting me onto this amazing platform that you have here and that you have curated. And I definitely will be staying tuned for more of your work, and feel free anytime to reach out to me on updates on anything going on in cannabis in Trinidad and Tobago. So yeah.
Great, no worries. I was glad as well, because first of all, I'm happy to speak English anyway, because I have to put myself into it. And as I said, I'm watching what you're doing.
Fantastic.
Oh, thank you. I'm watching all the products you are trying and stuff. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so envious to just do content like that, but it's not possible here because the context is so weird, but it will come in a few years. We'll be able to be open about anything. But yeah, keep doing your work, because I guess it's not I guess, but I know it's extremely important to have people knowledgeable, to have young people, and to have people that can relate. It's really important. So thanks a lot, Nayasha.
No problem. Hi,
Thank
Julie.
you.
Thank you
Bye.
very much again. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Thanks a lot for following this episode. I hope you learned a lot about Trinidad and Tobago, about how decriminalization affects the consumer over there. Thanks a lot for Nayasha for being here, and just enjoy. Please don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to give me a comment. I just want to know basically how you like this episode. I would love to do more, but I need a little bit of time. It will come soon, hopefully. And yeah, please let me know what you think about. Activate the bell in order to receive notification. Subscribe, you already know the drill. Connect, French West Indies, the Caribbean Cannabis Culture pod on Instagram. Hellas Trends, my personal kind of page, but I don't post a lot at the moment because of all the restrictions, and I don't want it to be, I ain't got time for it to be canceled. So I'm just not going to post a lot, but thanks a lot. It was the 5th episode, and I'll see you soon. Bye.